Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is, and always will be, George.
You're promising not to change it. That's wild. My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. See, my war name is actually Usul, but...
You are Tiny Desert Mouse.
I'm the Tiny Desert Mouse, which is the pillar that holds up all creation. Go
yes,
see Dune if you haven't seen it. I don't know if you are aware that there's a $100 million marketing campaign currently to make you go see the film Dune Part 2 by Denis Villeneuve, but it's real good.
Spent $100 million marketing it. All they had to do was release the fuckable popcorn bucket. That is all they had to do. You release the fleshlight bucket.
What the fuck? Look, just for the listeners' reference, I've been sitting here for the last 20 minutes while these two have just jizzed on each other.
You're so rude. Just let me have one thing that I'm excited about. The rest of the time, I'm like, fuck the world, burn it all down, late stage capitalism, everything's dying. We're on the brink of environmental as well as generational demographic collapse. And I express one modicum of joy, like, this sci-fi film's really a good adaptation of the book. And then Adam's like, boo, you suck.
Just for reference, I've just been sitting here for the last 20 minutes while these two who have seen the second film, I've seen the first film, I haven't seen the second film, have been talking about it. And Tom brought up this thing and we sort of moved on and now he's re-raised it. The fuckable popcorn bucket. Now,
so Adam, were you not seriously up on fuckable popcorn bucket law?
I wasn't up on that. I mean, I'm assuming some people are up on it, literally and figuratively, which is why it's a fuckable popcorn bucket.
Have you seen the popcorn bucket?
No. Is it?
Okay.
Like, we're talking like is it something you can physically?
No. You know how popcorn bucket, it's a particularly big thing in America. They used to do it here, right. I'll take the Men in Black combo, please, and there's a collector's edition like Men in Black popcorn bucket and cup or whatever, right?
So, I know.
So in America, they've got one for Dune. And it is a popcorn bucket, and then the lid on the top is like a mound of rock, and then coming out of it is a sandworm, and then in the sandworm's mouth are the bristles like they are in the film. So the idea is that you can put your hand through the bristles of the sandworm's mouth and pull your popcorn out.
So like flashlight. They made a flashlight.
Yes, precisely. You got it. You didn't even see a picture, and you made the connection in 5 seconds
with bristles. I was like, it's a flashlight. Yeah.
5 seconds. 5 seconds. Adam got it without even seeing it. How did the marketing team not just go, we've created a sex toy?
How many marketing people ticked off this motherfucker? There was. It went into. They said they did a design. It got approved. Like, it went up and got approved by the client. It went into production. There's like 1,000 people that must have looked at this and gone, seems weird to me, but okay.
They're just like, it's the sandworm. The sandworm's iconic in this series. Great job, Kevin. Yeah. And then, no, everyone's like, I'm going to stick my dick in that.
Is that a thing people have actually been?
I don't know if people actually have. I saw a photo of someone going to a cinema with a t-shirt that just said, I'm just here to fuck the popcorn bucket. And he had one. Smiling. So, anyway,
there's t-shirts. Someone made it.
Someone printed a t-shirt. Whether they're in mass production, I don't know. But, anyway, all they needed to do was make this viral fuckable popcorn bucket. And people are talking about the movie. $100 million? What a waste.
You guys look at very different parts of the internet to me.
Twitter. Called Twitter.
It's very.
You're not on the popcorn box fucking part of Twitter. You're in a different part of the algorithm. You think you're better than us, huh?
I look at articles about SpaceX and military defense spending and Ukraine and stuff, and that's about it, really.
Adam, the efficacy of sticking your dick in various things is the big part of the internet. It will blow your mind.
Speaking of your dicks, speaking of putting your dicks in things, the US Supreme Court has...
what have they stuck their dick into, Adam?
They've stuck their big Supreme dick into...
Can I just, for the record, I hate that transition. I just really thumbs down on that. I veto that.
No, honestly, love that. Honestly, I'm all about it. I'm all about it. We're talking about the Supreme Court. Fuck them. They are giant dick.
There are large portions of the US that see anything the Supreme Court or the federal government does as sticking their dick in their freedom. So, I mean, the analogy sticks. I'm sorry.
I mean, it really is. And they do just like wave their proverbial dick around and say,
okay,
you don't
all
get
right,
any freedoms, you don't get any freedoms.
Enough with the dick chat. Can we get to the story, please?
So the US Supreme Court has ruled that the various state rulings where Donald Trump was taken off the ballot invalid, and they have to add him back in, basically.
Yeah.
Now,
states can't decide who can run for a federal
position.
Role.
Well, that's kind of part of it, but I think you're missing one important component, and part of that is basically what they're saying is where an because individual states make rulings about who can be on the ballot or not all the time, in terms of like, you need to collect a certain number of signatures and you need to file by this date and you need to pay this amount of money, and like ballot access is a thing for this reason, because 50 different states have 50 different ways of ensuring that you are on the ballot for a federal election. So it's not
great system,
right? The whole system in the US is clunky.
It's terrible.
You know what? We got 50 states. Everyone can do it however the fuck they want. This won't backfire anywhere.
So it's established already that states have the ability to make determinations as to who can appear on a federal ballot. But the argument, I guess, that the Supreme Court was making is that it's not up to, if any one state, say for example Colorado or Maine, took a federal candidate off the ballot, that would essentially be in a two-party race where everything's like very polarized and these elections are razor-thin margins, 50-50. Entire states not being available to a particular candidate would more or less ensure that the other candidate wins, right?
Yeah.
So
in a two-horse race, if you take one of the horses off the ballot and they can't vote for it, then they either won't vote or they'll vote for that horse. But
specifically the ruling of Colorado and how Colorado chooses to treat one of the two major party candidates would effectively be deciding for the nation. And then you have a potential where there's a patchwork where, some Republican states will turn around and say, well, fuck you, Joe Biden did an insurrection because he took a shit this morning. And then all of a sudden it's just, not a cohesive system. Now, I appreciate that argument, and that is an argument that makes sense from like a practical standpoint. However, the letter of the law on this is pretty clear. Like, as someone who holds 0 law degrees, I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend to play one on television. Like, it seems like if you were involved in an insurrection and you run for office later, you are prohibited from doing that. Like, it's a pretty like normie reading of that 14th Amendment clause.
Well, this is the thing
which says that.
Specify. That's the clause that Colorado made their ruling under, and the 14th Amendment basically says, anyone after the Civil War, it was basically to prevent anyone who fought for the other side from running for office. So if you engage in insurrection, you probably can't be eligible. But what the court was effectively saying, my reading of this article was that a state can't decide that. If it's a federal court or federal jurisdiction that would have to invalidate Trump's
but then the Supreme Court has then gone a step further, and in the majority part of the opinion, they've like outlined a process for how the 14th Amendment is supposed to work, which is basically like you need to pass an act of Congress, which is absolutely not what the framers of the Constitution intended at all. So it turns what they call a self-executing clause of the Constitution, so something that just exists independent of any kind of enforcement mechanism. So like, for example, there's a clause in there that says you need to be over 35 to run for president. So it's not that if you're 34, they need to pass an act of Congress to prevent you from becoming the president. That's not how it would work. It's just like, you're 34, you're not allowed to run. That's self-executing. So basically what they've said is it's actually not self-executing based on nothing, even though we're all textualists and we abide by the written word as it stands on the paper. We've just come up with a new system which basically says this is how you would have to prevent someone from being for running or for becoming the president if they were guilty of insurrection, is Congress needs to pass a new law basically for that one person. And it's like, that's not how this has been used in the past. There are people who were at January 6th who have then run for office at a state level who have been taken off the ballot because of this clause, because they were insurrectionists. So I don't see why, and the wording refers to officers, anyone who's an officer of the government. And their argument the Trump campaign's argument was basically like, oh, the president's not an officer of the government. It's like, well, what is he then?
He's the commander-in-chief.
They designed
chief of the government.
They specifically designed this law. Like, use your brain for a second. They designed this law to prevent anyone who was involved in the insurrection, being the Civil War, to hold any position of power in the United States government after
the Civil War.
After the Civil War, during Reconstruction. And the idea that they would have that law apply to everyone except the person in charge makes no sense. Like, so even like on a very basic reading, like the Supreme Court has just gone, this seems very hard and we don't want to. That seems to be the justification, rather than like explain on a legal basis how this doesn't work. They're just like, that seems very hard. The consequences of this would be terrible. When it comes to the consequences of overturning Roe versus Wade, they couldn't give a shit. They're like, oh, well, that's for you. That's for the states to decide. Who cares if it creates a patchwork quilt of abortion providers and uncertain legalities across 50 different states in terms of abortion access? That's not our problem. It's our job to judge, and your problem to figure it out. But when it comes to protecting Trump, all of a sudden they're like, whoa, slow down a minute.
Yeah, that really seemed like a method for them to be like, okay, how can we say, oh no, the 14th Amendment still exists and is a thing, and not like overturn it, but also allow our guy to still run for president?
It still exists, it's still legitimate, but also can never be used and doesn't apply to the guy who's actually running.
For this guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the Supreme Court is a fucking joke, man. Like,
it's incredibly crazy.
Hearing educated, like actual lawyers talking about this and basically just being incandescent with rage as to the complete lack of justification for it is enough for me. It's like Emily Bazelon, like strict scrutiny, the podcast, like all of these intelligent court watchers are looking at this going, this makes no fucking sense based on the logic. Like, it's incredibly frustrating.
Apparently, the decision was unanimous, but allegedly there was some dissension as to the mechanisms around how this would be implemented.
Yeah.
But I mean, what the advice they've released is what they've released, and sort of is what it is now, I guess. But this is what happens when you get to stack the courts with people that like you.
When you're Donald Trump,
When
I
you stack the court,
everyone tries to stack the court with someone that's on their side, so to speak.
Yes, when you've got a court that's stacked with people you appointed, so therefore kind of like owe their positions to you, and also has another one whose wife was very much keen for the insurrection to happen. You're doing well.
What Donald Trump had, 3 picks? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Which was
Amy Coney
huge.
Barrett. There was Brett Kavanaugh.
I forget the third one.
There was another one as well.
Yeah, there was a third one.
Good times in the US. So that sort of, I guess, gets rid of the like that was probably at one point I was like, oh, that might be the best hope maybe of stopping this whole thing, but no, got turned over.
To quote Barry Keoghan in The Banshees of Inisherin, well, there goes that dream.
It was that dream. And Nikki Haley's dream has also ended now as well. So if you thought that maybe there'd be another candidate that might be able to stop Trump in his tracks, you would be wrong.
I mean, you would have been not paying attention for the past all the primaries either.
Yeah. It's Trump. It's Trump's world. We're all just living in it. I see his re-election being almost inevitable at this point, like unless something really drastic changes about the Biden campaign, or they find that machine from The Fly and they can put him in with a little 20-year-old and get them to switch bodies, combine bodies with a 20-year-old guy as opposed to a fly. Then that's probably the only way that Joe
having
Biden's
only recently seen The Fly. Oh my God, the creepy homunculus that would be the result of that would be, oh my God. Have you seen The Fly?
Hey, listen, I'm not kidding around. I got the body of a 20-year-old. I'm not kidding, Jack.
He slowly starts turning into the Fly. So like he starts oozing out of his skin and bits falling off. Can you imagine the Trump that's like He's come out and he's all weird.
No, I'm not saying Trump. I'm saying Biden. The only way
okay.
Biden's going to win is if he combines what he was.
Okay, well, still. So then Biden comes like slouching out, and then his bits start falling off. His bits are falling off him now, Tom. And they're just like, oh my god, there's a face growing out of his chest, and like, ugh. Oh man, The Fly's great. You should watch it.
Yeah, the polls are looking very bad for Joe Biden v. Trump. You want to see a bad Biden poll? Hold my beer, says Marjorie Taylor Greene as she unveils yet another picture of Hunter Biden's cock on the floor of the Congress. So that's bad. There was also the State of the Union this week, which we didn't put on down, but was a thing. And I don't know what B12 shot they gave Joe Biden, but he definitely seemed mostly conscious throughout the whole experience.
Speed, George. They gave him speed.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, there's a guy from Donald Trump's White House which might have been able to hook him up, which we'll talk about in a sec. But modafinil, whatever they gave him, shot of B12, the blood of a young virgin, whatever it was. Keep it up, guys. Let's get this guy moving.
Wasn't he? It's like I've only seen bits from the State of the Union, but didn't he like have a bit of a waffle on of sort of how Israel should stop killing people? And everyone was like, maybe you should stop giving them the bombs with which they are using to do that then, Joe? And it was like, nope, gliding over that. Vote for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are not thrilled about Biden's Gaza policy. Although
they are getting the language is getting stronger from the US.
They're floating stuff, like they're putting stuff through Kamala Harris, getting her to talk more about ceasefire and stuff. And
it's like the language is getting stronger. The bombs are remaining equally as strong and still being handed over.
Yeah, the bomb strength is still weapons grade by definition. But so I mean, there has been some sort of movement on that, talking about a ceasefire and trying to, get a 6-week ceasefire and then get that to be a more permanent kind of end of the hostilities. But I mean, essentially, what we've realized at this point is Joe Biden has no power over Bibi Netanyahu. So the idea that they can control Israel, like obviously we've spent, the last 4 months seeing that play out in the national news media as to how that's not actually possible. But I agree with Tom. Then you should stop sending them weapons, right? Like that's a pretty big chit that the government, the Biden administration has refused to play. Is the let's just stop giving them the weapons for them to conduct this campaign that we don't like sort of move.
If your official stance is that you don't like them bombing the ever-loving shit out of Palestine, don't give them the bombs.
But what would Lockheed Martin do?
Think of the shareholders. Who's going to deliver value to the shareholders of Lockheed Martin?
Lockheed Martin might actually. I don't know if they're even a supplier.
I don't know.
Israelis. I made that name up, but
I'm sure Lockheed Martin can find someone else to.
So there was the State of the Union, but Nikki Haley was obviously dropped out of the Republican race now, so she stopped short of endorsing Trump. But
she said basically it's his job to earn the endorsement of my voters, and I hope he does. Which is kind of like, so she's saying she wants him to win, like she stopped short of out and out endorsing him, but was still critical of Biden. So the default assumption is that she's and this backs up my assertion. I think I talked about it on a previous show that she's not really running for president this time around. She was running in case Donald Trump dies or goes to prison, and then she's waiting in the wings, or B, worst case scenario, she's setting herself up with national name ID for 2028.
For a future run.
Run.
And also seeing Biden jump in just on a real quick push just to be like, hey, Donald Trump doesn't want, what did he say here? Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley's supporters. I want to be clear, there's a place for them in my campaign. I'm like, sure.
He did say that. I was like, I don't know if that's...
Nice try.
I know that the Democrat campaign is now starting to circle around of the anyone but Trump sort of concept, but to then say to a bunch of people who hate Joe Biden, how many swing voters are really there that would have been in the Nikki Haley camp? I don't know.
So the Nikki Haley vote was largely comprised of independents, and in some states, some of those states like New Hampshire, for example, have open primaries, which means as long as you aren't a registered Democrat, you can vote. So there was kind of a bit of a push from the Haley campaign to get as many of those independent voters in, people who might be like Democrat curious, get those people into the Republican Party in order to be able to vote for her throughout this process.
Didn't the Democrats just go in and like stack the... Well, that would probably work out worse. I don't know.
Well, no, there was a lot of Democratic enthusiasm for Nikki Haley's candidacy because she was, sort of providing a challenge to Trump. And the longer that goes on, the longer Trump has to waste resources fighing Haley in the primary, means he has less resources to fight the Democrats in the general. So Democrats are like pretty enthusiastic about Haley as a spoiler for Trump, basically. And so a lot of the voters that she got, sort of college educated, independent leaning sort of people, would now potentially be up for grabs from Biden, because you'd think of the two candidates, if these people are never Trumpers, right? The whole party, the rest of the party is going for Trump. And there's like 30% of them are like, well, I definitely don't want to vote for Trump. I'm going to throw my weight behind whoever, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, whatever. If Trump is still the only other option, how many of those people are going to come home to Trump, and how many of them are going to be up for grabs to Joe Biden? I think there's a real potential strategy there where Biden...
Because remember, like, people just don't vote.
Well, there's that. There's that possibility as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's a not insignificant possibility that a portion of those Haley voters would come over to Biden rather than Trump, because they've already there's a revealed preference there that they already don't want to go with Trump. That's why they've supported Haley and others in the past. Right?
Yeah. So, I don't know. With the margin of, I think he had 10% in some states. And I don't know how Super Tuesday, what the exact margins were for that. But
so Trump smushed her. So of the 15 contests on Super Tuesday, she won Washington, D.C. and Vermont.
So she won too?
Well, D.C. is kind of like a mini one. So one, really.
Everyone's like, DC doesn't count.
DC doesn't count because it's full of like liberal coastal elites anyways.
Well, she did actually win. So I was just thinking she'd go through and not win any. So that's good.
Remember a little while ago where you're like, oh, let's not discount Nikki Haley. I was like, Trump's got this locked up. It's basically a done deal. Like the maths does not work for her. She is at best a factional candidate. And Adam's like, oh, no, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. I said, there's literally no way. It's mathematically not possible for her to win this. And Adam's like, oh, no. I could do a three-way. I could put a three-way multi on it.
Yeah, it's why we keep him around.
VP. So if Trump, I don't know if Trump would ask.
She won't go VP. No.
In his tweets, he's just like she got smooshed. Like,
and I think she ruled that out as well. Basically, so I'm not going to be anyone's VP. She's making a bid for president, and she's going to wait till next time round.
Yeah.
Although
I mean, surely it sounds like the kind of thing he would love to do. He'd be like, oh yeah, the person I absolutely smashed into the floor, be my VP, be my bitch.
But you got to kiss the ring. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he would love that.
Potentially, but she doesn't really open anything up to him from an advantageous point of view. He's much better going with someone like Tim Scott to try and peel off some black voters from the Democrats in the general. Like she doesn't really give him that much. Like, yes, the 30% of the party that was coalescing around her might then vote for Trump, but we already kind of have most of those voters anyway as Republicans. So I think it's more about trying to peel stuff away from Democrats and like even just a fraction of a percentage of the black vote or the Latino vote would really hurt the Democrats in a way that would be more advantageous to Trump than having Haley on board. And also, it's like Trump, if you say anything critical about Trump, like he'll destroy you. Like I don't think he's at all interested in having her as VP.
Might explain why the White House medical unit in the previous Trump presidency was distributing controlled substances like it was fucking discount day, Black Friday. You get one, you get one, you get one.
Distributing controlled substances like it was Oxycontin.
Yeah, literally. So the Defense Department's Inspector General released a report detailing how the White House medical unit in the Trump administration had been distributing these substances without any oversight and even sloppier record keeping. That there had been thousands and thousands, not like hundreds, thousands and thousands of doses of the stimulant modafinil, which is speed, basically. which is used by military pilots.
It's a stimulant
to stay alert.
Yeah.
To stay alert in long
used
missions.
by military
right?
pilots to stay alert. So we all imagine just the whole, oh, I'm awake. Whoo, I'm awake. Yeah, that. Like whatever you picture in your head that makes you just suddenly go like, let's go. Yeah, ready. Woo.
The thing is, modafinil is generally like it's not quite speed. Like it's not an amphetamine, but it is a stimulant, right? And it does have a lower potential for abuse and dependence than other kind of amphetamines. But it's still stimulant, and people on the White House, working for dozens of hours at a time whilst on a stimulant to be up during the day and then taking Xanax and Ambien at night to go to sleep seems like it's probably an unhealthy combination. Anyway, this Rolling Stone article opens with, if you ever looked at the actions of the Trump White House and wondered, are they on drugs? The answer was, in some cases, yes. Absolutely yes.
Yep.
And
love to see it.
Intro line, isn't it? They've written that quite well.
You love to see it.
And maybe, and that maybe sort of explains some of the poor decision making and chaos of the Trump presidency. And
Scaramucci was part of that.
No, Scaramucci preloaded. He came ready to go.
Yeah, that was all Scaramucci.
Yeah.
Au natural.
So, essentially, investigators repeatedly noted that the unit had ordered thousands and thousands of doses of the stimulant modafinil, which has been used by military pilots to stay alert during long missions.
And just other sources say senior staffers would repeatedly down Xanax with alcohol. Good.
One
good.
was
Don't do that.
One senior administration official put it, quote, "You try working for him and not chasing pills with alcohol."
I mean, so there's also that side of it. It's like, absolutely do not do that. But if I found myself having to deal with Donald Trump's machinations every day, oh boy, I'd imagine I would probably turn to some bad habits to just, sleep at night.
Yeah, no, they don't make those pink Xanax strong enough. There's 2 pinks and a white, I think, to get through a day working at the Trump White House.
Mm-hmm.
So that's bad. There was also this accusation that there was sort of a climate of fear in the Trump White House around private therapy sessions.
You think?
So apparently the White House provides therapy sessions on request for selected personnel going through any issues, like an employee assistance program. But according to this article, White House staffers were instructed to be on their guard. One former senior administration official tells Rolling Stone that within the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, they were warned by a colleague against divulging anything private during a private White House medical session that they, quote, would not want to be used against them, unquote. At the time, the source notes this puzzled the official, who was then told that under Trump, the office had a reputation for being more porous with private information, quote, than you might expect. And this is the Trump administration that we're talking about, so I expect quite a bit.
So the Titanic with a big hole in it, basically, is a leaky boat.
Yeah. So to the extent that like people would come back from a therapy session and then, senior administration officials would go to the therapist and be like, so? Like, what did he tell you? Like, what's up?
Wow.
Which is not legal or good. I don't know. It kind of makes sense. It's like with that book, Blitzed, that talked about the Nazis taking a whole bunch of meth during the war and that explaining some of the like crazier decisions that they made in the late stages of the conflict. You kind of see this and you go, yeah, it's kind of like that.
Oh yeah, everyone was out of their mind.
Everyone was out of their mind on fucking drugs and Xanax and booze. Like it kind of explains most of the like. He's like, okay, we're gonna do a fucking hurricane.
That was like, early in the administration.
That kind of makes sense.
Out of everyone here in the Trump White House, though, the one person I would believe is not on drugs is Donald Trump.
Well, I remember there was a thing going around.
Famously doesn't drink and all this sort of stuff. Like all that Trump crazy is all him.
There was a thing that I remember hearing about that he was on. Trump himself was on stimulants, like a diet supplement, and then I don't know if that's been substantiated.
Right. Okay. Because I know like all his thing is not drinking and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, no, he's crazy is 100% him. Like that is all his brain under his own steam. No substances required to be that much of a batshit insane monster.
Who is the dude outside the Four Seasons. Was it the Four Seasons? Or
Rudy Giuliani.
No, it was I think it was the night of the election defeat. And was it Don Jr.? One of them? It's just like out the front of a thing. And he was doing a speech, but his eyes were just like
bugging out of his head.
Wired. He
I
was
remember
wired.
his speech at like the Republican National Convention or something when it was live streamed during like COVID lockdowns and things. Yeah, everyone was like, "Is he okay?" Like flop sweating like a maniac. Yeah,
just like me now because it's 39 degrees and I want to die.
Oh yes, it is also hot and sticky in Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah, so I remember there were, I don't think they've been substantiated, but there were rumors going around that, Trump was a user of stimulants.
Okay.
Like over the years, but
yeah,
I don't know
the little
where that comes
the little
from.
paragraph in this Rolling Stone article, another one I found interesting was an aide to Melania Trump is alleged to have walked into the medical unit and said, "Could you prescribe me Xanax?" And like it wasn't like sitting down for a session to like talk about whether that would be handy. It was just like demanding it, like, "Give me Xanax."
I am incredibly anxious.
And the source was like, "I'm not a doctor or a pharmacist. Like, I'm not allowed to prescribe you that. No." And so she just stormed out. It was like, "Come in, give me Xanax." No, fine, left.
Well, if you don't know, if you don't try, you don't know, right?
Sure. I ask everyone I meet for Xanax.
Can you prescribe me
just in
Xanax?
case they can give it to me.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
It's like, it's the Dr. Nick thing. Sure, baby, I can prescribe anything I want.
Well, maybe Jim Chalmers can prescribe you Xanax. Who knows?
Maybe.
Is he a doctor, Jim Chalmers, or did I make that up?
Well, I mean, but you could be a doctor of many things, Adam.
Yeah, probably like an economy doctor, not a medicinal
I don't think he's a doctor.
I believe both my parents are doctors, but not of medicine. So I don't think they can prescribe anything.
Yeah, the only kind of doctors... The only kind of doctors that count was when someone says, like, on a plane, like, "Is there a doctor on the plane?" You go, "Well, technically, I've got a doctorate in economics." And it's like, shut up.
Oh, no,
the guy's frothing at his mouth.
He's a doctor. Dr. Jim Chalmers.
Doctor of
what?
what?
But a doctor in what?
Doesn't really say. I'd have to do more Googling. Come on, guys. Give me half a second. PhD,
Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Communication,
Australian National University,
PhD in Political Science. Yeah,
there you go.
Doctor of Spin, shall we say?
And he wrote his doctoral thesis on Paul Keating. And there you go.
Oh,
so that just convinced half of the listeners to not vote for him.
He was mainly just quoting all his best zingers.
Yeah, I want to do you slowly a dissertation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In this 300,000 word dissertation, I too shall do you slowly.
Well, it's funny because I'm pretty sure it was on this subject. Paul Keating at the ASEAN summit, which this announcement we're about to talk about, where it was released. Paul Keating, lost his shit.
It must be so hard to have one of your heroes absolutely dunk on you. Like, it must be really like. Yeah. I don't know how I would feel about that. That would be
pretty
really
old now. It's like they wheel out these old prime ministers, and it's like, okay, all right, John. So, like John Howard's wheeled out, like he's a bloody.
They wheel him out like Hannibal Lecter on the gurney on the straight platform, the raised platform.
Yeah, if they wheel John Howard out into your electorate when you're running for it, oh man, that's the kiss of death. Like, you're really circling the drain.
Someone hasn't told the Liberals that though yet, Tom, because they keep doing it.
They keep doing it. And you know what? Keep doing it. It's great. Because
keep reminding everyone.
It was the ASEAN summit this week. That just basically means it's Australia and Southeast Asia, a bunch of leaders getting together and having a bit of a talk about politics, business, and various ways of the world. It is a multilateral summit. And Australia, as part of that, we've timed this pretty well. We've promised a $2 billion fund for Southeast Asian countries to boost Australian trade and investment.
So generous, Adam. We timed this pretty well. It's almost like it was intentional.
almost like it was completely organized on purpose.
And then this article, obviously, like, it's written sort of before they announced it, and it was like, it's obviously they've put a press release out or they've been backgrounded or something, because it's like the ABC understands that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will do this, and here are all the details. So basically, it's a fund it's a big pile of money that we're going to put somewhere,
$2 billion.
Then basically release via grants and other various mechanisms to different businesses and governments to help fund infrastructure, particularly, which is quite nice, clean energy projects in our region. It is sort of like what one might call a belt and road initiative. No. Some sort of road and belt.
I see nothing.
Some sort of.
I hear nothing. There will be neither belts nor roads. Okay.
For those of us who are a little stupid, can you maybe explain what a belt and road initiative is?
Over the last decade and a half, something like that, China has embarked on a very robust set of infrastructure spending initiatives all over Africa, Asia, the Middle East, called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is essentially allowed to create China as the hub, where all the spokes of the wheel lead in terms of global commerce. Now, this is a way of, they're not just building ports in Africa out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because it creates a global infrastructure for trade, which hopefully benefits China and their economic position in the world, right?
Yeah. It's diplomacy by a big fire hose of money, basically.
Yeah, well, it's kind of what the Americans used to do. You look at the Marshall Plan after the Second World War, it was like, hey, you know how we destroyed everything? Here's a fire hose of money to fix it all up. So what's Dresden? What do you mean there's nothing left of Dresden? Shh. So essentially, what this is, along with other multilateral initiatives like the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership and things like that, are kind of meant to be other Southeast Asian countries' response to the Belt and Road Initiative. As far as I can see it, it's kind of like, okay, well, if you're going to try and enhance multilateral cooperation with these countries, we will do the same with our neighbors and surrounding nations to have better bidirectional trade with each other in order to sort of hedge against a rising China. But I think which is
what we've been calling about for because they reduced the foreign aid budget. So this is, I guess, a way of,
how I hate that. It's so dumb because it's like foreign aid. People when asked to estimate how much of our Australian budget is foreign aid, like Australians are like woefully dumb when it comes to estimating that. They're like, I don't know, like 30-40% of the Australian budget must be foreign aid. And it's like, it's a fraction of a percent. And secondly, foreign aid is not what you think foreign aid is, where it's just like sending pallets of food to kids in Gaza. Like, that'd be great if that's what foreign aid was, but it's not really that. Mostly what it is making strategic investments in allies that redound to our benefit. Like, we don't just spend money as a country for no particular reason. We do it because investing in surrounding neighbors like Singapore and, Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries around us is good for us because it increases trade. Yes, I raised my desk. Why are you looking at me like that?
Because the camera just started moving. And I was like, what? Are we on a ride? Has George just got on a ride?
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
And if you look at this
careful, George, the unknown is behind you.
Oh, no.
If you look at the photo of Anthony Albanese and Vietnam's Prime Minister, then you might think that that's potentially what they're doing. This is also sits alongside, I think 5 years ago, the Morrison government established the Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility, which again used more as grants up to $1 billion and long-term loans up to $3 billion to back infrastructure in the Pacific. This is more, I think, about direct investment as opposed to pay us back later on kind of thing.
And a lot of those long-term loan programs can be quite problematic, as we've learned during the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, where they make all these like loans which seem attractive at the time and then become quickly unpayable by various, African nations. And then they go, that's all right. You don't have to pay for the port. You just give it back to us. And now it's ours. And now there's a bunch of Chinese sovereign land in all of these various countries that we own. So loans can be kind of exploitative if they're done with bad intentions. But obviously, if it's a case where we're giving this money away via grants to facilitate trade between these various countries, then presumably that's more of an unalloyed good for the world. And
the clean energy stuff is good as well. I think what they're trying to do is really leverage Australian knowledge on various solar things, whatever else. Like Jakarta at the moment, the air quality is so bad in Jakarta. They've got like this system where they've got sprinklers on top of buildings to try and like catch all the water has to try and capture all the crap in the air, but they're not sure whether it's even going to work. Like there was an ABC report on it the other week. But
jeez, that's gnarly.
Partly also probably why they want to move the capital of Indonesia to a different island. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, these kind of things are kind of good. I think it's good that we try and show leadership. Australia tries and shows leadership in the region. Although Paul Keating, again, cracked the shits in the middle of the conference, basically said that we were just being anti-China. We were basically being antagonistic against China for the sake of it, which is, this is kind of what it is. I mean, this is meant to be a foil for Chinese expansionism, right?
There is that element to it, but it also like is in an era where we've got extremely flat GDP, which we'll talk about in a sec, having targeted investments in areas of growth like clean energy with our neighboring nations in order to facilitate both good relations as well as trade, like seems like a pretty smart idea. Like clean energy is clearly going to be a big deal into the future. It makes sense for us to invest in this as a method of increasing our trade with these neighboring nations. Yes, there is that underlying element of it, which is China containment, but like it is also just makes good sense to invest in your neighbors. Now, there's also the element of like, we do a lot of business directly with China as well. China is our main trading partner for basically everything, for all intents and purposes. So it's not as though these things necessarily come at the expense of China, because we're also like a lot of those, a lot of the solar panels that we're buying for clean energy and all this sort of stuff is coming from China, right? Like China is also going to be a direct beneficiary of our investment in this area because they make a lot of the components and bloody panels and semiconductors and all that stuff. So I don't view those things as necessarily mutually exclusive. And if that's really the case, if we really were trying to contain China, like we wouldn't be doing all of our trade with them. So it's hedging our bets. It's a bit of strategic ambiguity. Like, we'll work with China, but we'll also work with all of your neighbors who aren't so crash hot on you. Like, that makes sense.
Diversification.
Yeah.
Speaking of diversification or lack thereof, Australia's GDP and economy aren't looking too good at the moment. So our GDP did go up very slightly in, when was it? The last quarter?
Yay!
0.2% growth over the December quarter. So if you're talking about...
Is this good?
It's not.
No.
What it means is a flat economy. So essentially there's two different articles here. One from Michael Janda from ABC News, and then another one in a much louder voice from Greg Jericho over at the Guardian. But essentially saying more or less the same thing, just one a bit more vociferous than the other, is that the Reserve Bank's done a pretty good job of putting the brakes on the economy, and that rate rise in November that they put through was probably unnecessary. And not only now do we need to stop doing the rate rises, both of these articles from like pretty seasoned business reporters are saying not only shouldn't we have done that rate rise in November, we should actually start cutting now. And there are various experts quoted in both their articles that have a really good basis for that. So in terms of and the signs, I guess the point, the reason that we're bringing this up today is like the signs were pretty clear to see before that meeting in November as to where the economy was going. So Greg Jericho in his article talks about how he warned about inventory levels in September, basically saying, hey, like this is a potential sort of indicator of what's to come, is that a lot of retailers are reducing the amount of inventory that they have on hand because they're not expecting as much consumer enthusiasm going forward for them to actually buy those things and be able to clear that stock. So that, amongst, the fact that we're in a technical per capita recession already at that point, as well as like weakening GDP figures, increasing joblessness rates, things like that. Kind of the contention from both of them is basically like, yeah, the RBA should not only have not raised rates in November, but they need to start cutting them now, because we're sort of at the top of a precipice where if we don't start doing something now to stimulate the economy, we're going to start heading into not just a per capita recession, but a real recession. Like if you take away we've talked about the per capita recession before, but it's essentially like we're not in a recession.
Growth.
Yeah, population growth, basically. Yeah. So the amount of growth per person is going backwards. But if you consider the fact that we've imported whatever it is, 500,000 people over the last period, then it looks like we're growing technically 0.2% for the December quarter. But yeah, I mean, but that's divided by many, many more people now because of that migration. So it's bad.
But inflation, this is the thing. They're raising interest rates to combat inflation. Inflation is still at 3 point, or
for the year, like
9%.
Yeah, but you're talking about for the year to date, which is like from now, from 12 months ago.
That was the last update in it held whatever it was, like the from I think it was December to January, it was 3.9 or something like that. Might be 3.4 maybe.
So the GDP figures show the Reserve Bank has slowed things down so drastically that the Australian economy, for the first time in 40 years, has gone an entire year where it grew only because of population increases. On a per capita basis, things were truly bad. 2023 was only the third time in the past 40 years that our economy was smaller when accounting for population growth than it had been the year before. Like, yes, you're looking at the inflation data, which is a compilation of the average of a full year, but like what's happening right now in the last quarter and for the next, looking ahead to the next 6 months looks really, really bad. And to keep on this current trajectory, the argument that they're making and that I've been making as well, that's why I'm talking about this, because it reinforces my priors, is that you need to start cutting interest rates. Like we can't just,
they're probably not going to do that.
We can't just like wait till a crisis happens and they go, oh, that's a really bad recession. Be a shame if someone could do something about it. They go, wait a minute, Michelle, you're the Reserve Bank governor. You could do something about it. You go, oh, fuck, wait. And they throws a bunch of plates up in the air like she's just realized she's the RBA governor and go, someone should do something about this. I'm someone.
Firstly, the RBA is conservative and reactionary. They're not going to do things proactively. That's the first point.
The thing is, they're not conservative.
I've still got other points.
All right, I'll allow it.
The second point is they're combating inflation. They're not, as far as the RBA is concerned, they're going to turn around to the government and go, well, if GDP's flat, that's on you. So it's not necessarily
but hang on,
in complete purview of the RBA to use interest rates to wiggle the Australian economy. Yes, it plays into it, but that's not what they're focused on. They're focused on inflation, and inflation hasn't dropped, and there are a variety of reasons for that, which aren't necessary, which are externalities. But
they are supposed to have a dual mandate. Things. To be clear, the RBA has a dual mandate, which says they're to look after price stability, inflation, and full employment. So it's not just a case of like,
but full employment.
We got to adjust inflation, and that's the only thing that's going on. And inflation's the only priority. And who cares if we tank the economy? That's a you problem, not a me problem. Like
the definition of full employment is to be clear,
is whatever I fucking say.
The definition of full employment is that anyone who's looking for a job will find one within a short period. It's not that.
So it's like the US drone war. Anyone who's an enemy combatant is a military-aged male. Yeah, I'd say it's great if you could just change what words mean. That's great. It makes my life so much easier.
So your unemployment rate could be in the 4%, but if you get a job within 3 weeks, it doesn't matter, is what the RBA is. And the government, it's also a government, it's a government policy. I think it's a Labor policy, actually. Sorry, I think that's what I'm quoting from. It may not actually necessarily line up with what the RBA definition is, but that's what the Labor's definition is.
It just seems to me like when you say conservative, I say late. Right? It's once there's been a very established trend of like 3 to 6 months, and everyone in the news media, all the financial analysts are looking at it going, this makes no sense. Why aren't they doing something about it? That's when they start doing something about it. We saw this with raising interest rates in the first place. You know, they said there's not going to be any inflation until 2024. We're not going to even start thinking about raising rates until 2024. Everyone just relax, okay? Buy a new Beamer. Take your girlfriend out to a nice steak dinner, okay? Don't worry about it, baby. It's on us. And then all of a sudden they go, oh, fuck, the trend's really obvious now. Let's jack up rate up 13 times in a row. They jack up the rates. And then, people say, oh, they should be stopping. They don't stop. They jack up the rates another couple of times before they start stopping. And then now when it's like the economy looks like it's sliding into the toilet again, they go, oh, no, we're not going to cut rates. And then all of a sudden we're going to be in a recession. They're going to go, fuck, we're going to fucking cut the rates. It just seems like they're constantly bullwhipping and we know that this is their term, long and variable lags between the changes in interest rate policy and the time it takes for them to flow through to the market. So if you're seeing the beginnings of a market downturn now, the interest cuts that you make today won't actually flow through to anyone's benefit for another 3 to 6 months because of how things work. So it just seems negligent to me to not be trying to at least forecast 3 to 6 months.
If you're expecting a 1% rate cut, that's not going to happen. At
that's not
most,
what I'm
it would
saying.
be 0.25 or something.
But the markets, if you look at the markets, the share prices and Bitcoin's gone through the roof because people are getting the sensation that like, okay, it's time to start cutting rates. And so they're starting to price that in to the market now ahead of rates actually being cut. Like every market analysts, everyone knows they need to start cutting rates. It seems like the only ones who don't know it is the fucking RBA.
Wow. Yeah. I just...
Well, they know it. They're just not doing.
I'm not concerned about 3 point
recession for the last little
But that's
while.
what I mean. Like there's been a lot of indicators up until this point that suggest the Australian economy is not in a good position. And it's just like, don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Certainly one thing that I've just gotten out of the property sector for the first time in 12 years. And it was a good Instagram sort of video I saw the other day. It was a good summary, which was like, one of the key problems at the moment is that the price of housing, whether it be rentals or stuff to buy, is going up, and that contributes to inflation to a certain extent. People have got no money at the moment, yet house prices are still somehow going up because demand is there because we have a housing shortage. But then we can't build more housing because the cost to build more housing is prohibitive and no one can pay for it because interest rates are too high.
And what's causing the increased cost of capital that makes housing too expensive to build? It's high interest rates. So it's this ironic little
housing bubble that was fucking artificially inflated for fucking years because of low interest rates, and then it's.
But what I'm saying is, there's a happy medium between 0% cash rate and whatever we're at now. 4 and a bit.
Well, we're only at 4 and a bit. Really,
but what it translates to is real interest rates of 6.5%. But you can have a situation where, capital is the weighted average cost of capital isn't crazy expensive for these developers who want to build things, and interest rates aren't prohibitive, because there are these feedback loops where if the more you raise interest rates, the more it puts pressure on people wanting to build houses, which means there's less housing supply, which means that the cost of houses goes up, which means inflation goes up. There are these feedback loops. It's not a simple thing of the way economists explain it to you, you're a little baby bird eating out of their hand, and they go, if interest rates goes up, people have less money to spend. If interest rates go down, people have more money to spend, and that's how they control inflation. It's no, there's all these weird little feedback loops and little exploits and arbitrage opportunities that no one's ever really considered, where in some cases, and housing is one of those things where it's because housing is so expensive, fluctuations in the housing price show up in the inflation data much more readily than the cost of a cherry ripe. You know what I mean? So it makes much more of a difference to the Australian economy if housing prices are artificially increased. So it doesn't, again, I don't see the logic in keeping rates where they are when there's all of these indicators that the economy is about to nosedive into the toilet. I
kind of want it to, it's just weirdly nihilistic that I kind of want the housing market to crash, and I kind of want the economy to crash.
Nobody wins. Let me tell you right now. Let me tell you, nobody wins.
I know. But part of me Like, I know you've just got bought a new house, but I kind of want to see everyone who fucking bought houses that are fucking overpriced lose all their equity and I'll be like, see, this is why the whole thing is dumb.
Thanks,
but
buddy.
Adam,
but
and you say you haven't watched June 2?
I don't know what June 2 is.
The housing market is essentially spice production. Everything relies on it.
Yeah, literally. I mean, 1 in 3 jobs in Australia are connected to the property market.
It would be bad. It would be real bad if the housing market.
I know it would be bad. It would be horrible. But there's just part of me that wants to eat the rich. That's just like, and not even rich. Just eat. We can eat
the rich. I'm all for eating the rich. Let's eat some rich.
But like, part of me
let's go right now.
Wants to see the system collapse and to be like, see, this is why the 30-year mortgage was a terrible idea. Like, anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another story. I mean, the increased availability of credit for people just allows people to buy more and more expensive houses, which means the cost of houses gets more and more. Like the whole idea of the mortgage, the way they frame it, it's like, oh, it's a financial instrument to allow you to help you realize your dreams. And it's like, right, but if there's no access to credit, then we couldn't make houses that were $1 million out in the middle of the bush. Like that just wouldn't be able to happen. And so house prices would be less. Like it just
back in the 60s, like before the 30-year mortgage was invented, you had to have like, I think it was up. So now you need like 20%. Like back then there was an ABC archival thing where they were talking about the cost of housing in Australia, how it was too fucking expensive, and the houses were like $5,000 or something stupid, or pounds. It might have been back then. I can't remember, but it was like you needed, I think it was a third or like half, and then you'd borrow the rest of it.
But if a house is $60,000 and you're making $30,000 a year, like that's not a big deal for you to save half. Like compared to now, where it's like, you're making 80 grand a year and you need to save 200 to 300 grand for a house. It's like, well, how are you going to do that? It's going to take you 10, 15 years to save up, assuming you're saving a shitload of money. It's going to take you a decade, 2 decades to save that amount of money to be able to put it down for a deposit. Like it is vanishingly difficult for most people now to be able to do that. And it only gets more difficult if more houses aren't being built. And one of the things that is causing houses not to be built is, ironically, the high interest rates, which make it not profitable for developers. So
I don't know. I just feel like fueling house prices through increasing debt forever and ever and ever is not.
No, it's not a long-term plan. I agree. It's terrible.
It's bad. So I mean, this is the thing: is if we lower interest rates, house prices will go. Demand will go through the roof in terms of the housing sector. It'll like even increase even further. There'll be a lot of people who are holding off on whether it's buying, renting, whatever. There'll be a lot of people holding off on housing stuff. Because of interest rates, and as soon as they go down even a bit, you'll see. I'm telling you now, you're going to see like 10% house price increases.
You're saying if we cut it down to 2% again, that's not what I'm arguing for. I'm just arguing for a reasonable, like a historic, median level interest rate of like 4 to 5%, as opposed to.
Well, we have one of. It was in retail, right?
Retail, right. Yeah. Like that's what I think. Would make more sense, where it's like it's not a handbrake on the economy, and yet the people who need ready access to capital and capital markets have access to reasonable capital, but you don't need to prove an incredible trajectory of growth in order to justify, like if you make a 5% profit on an investment, that's good enough for you to take money out of. I think too far in either direction has really broken incentives, and what I'm saying is I think we need just a more like sensible median approach compared to what we've had, where it just feels like with the RBA, it's just been swinging just wildly in either direction. There hasn't been a situation where it's like, oh, we'll leave it at this rate for 6 months and just see what happens. Like there hasn't been any of that. It's kind of been like, rats hitting the button going, oh, fuck, raise, oh, fuck, lower it. Like it just feels like that kind of bullwhipping dynamic over and over again. It makes me feel like there's no one at the wheel. It makes me feel like they don't know what they're doing. They're just waiting to see what the market and what analysts tell them to do, and then they'll just freak out.
It's all educated guesswork, really, at the end of the day.
No, I'm with Adam. We eat them.
Tom? Eat them?
Eat them.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Straight off the bat.
What do you think? Like a roast, or like a sort of spit, or sort of fry them? Like what do you think? What's the preferred method?
No, I think if you spit roast them for a really long time, it just falls off the bone. It's probably just the best way to go.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, spit.
Yep.
All right, good.
Yeah,
good deal.
Make a party of it.
Speaking of a party, the emulation industry, we're just going back to gaming chat here, and this is the last article for today. The emulation industry is all up in arms and a bit of fear going out there at the moment because Nintendo has started suing people.
Yeah, and yes, Nintendo is incredibly litigious about this. Emulation, yes, which I guess for the uninitiated, emulation is when you use software to try and you're essentially tricking software into thinking it's running on different hardware than it actually is. So, there's stuff that only was made and developed for, say, the Super Nintendo back in the, the 80s, 90s. But, those are hard to come by. The ones that you do come by kind of might be too old and might be broken or not work or anything like that. The games are hard to come by as well. But, there are people who develop software that can kind of boot the game software to believe it's running on a Super Nintendo, and then you're running it on a computer.
So the effect is you can play old games like Pokemon Blue on your computer, right?
Yeah.
You can play GoldenEye from Nintendo 64 on your PC, and it allows
GoldenEye
you to
is no longer lost to the annals of time of only being on the Nintendo 64. Yeah. It can be played on newer hardware. And it's been something that people have advocated for in terms of emulation for game preservation. It's just like people being able to watch old films, like, restoring old like film reels to be a DVD copy and all that sort of stuff. Although in those instances, they're reselling them. And that's where emulation gets interesting, because while like the developing of emulators isn't again, I'm not a lawyer, but isn't intrinsically illegal or a breach of intellectual property, the distribution of the games themselves
it's 100% copyright infringement. Like
the actual sharing of the game.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like going on and downloading a copy of a Super Nintendo game, like that's been ripped off its cartridge and shared to Pirate Bay and whatever, yes, is software piracy. So that's the tricky part. But if I have a Super Nintendo cartridge, George is holding up his old Game Boy Color,
which still works.
and yet still works. And if he had a card reader that he could download that software off that card onto his hard drive and run it through an emulator, he hasn't stolen anything. He owns that game. He paid for it.
Right. I'm playing the software that I purchased, right?
Yes, you're playing the software that you purchased just on another device.
So that's the sort of gray area where it's like...
But no one's doing that, Tom. They're downloading the software
downloading it off the internet.
Off the internet.
Well, I mean, yes, that's happening. PC. But the act of the downloading, it's the illegal part, not emulators existing, which is where Nintendo's litigiousness comes in as being, I think, it's bad faith. Like, they are
if I was Nintendo, I'd be suing everyone. I'm sorry.
Well, that's the good news. That's exactly what they're doing. So,
exactly what they're doing.
There was a Nintendo Switch emulator out on the market called Yuzu. They recently settled with Nintendo for $2.4 million. Nintendo said, knock, knock, knock. Hey, we are going to ruin your lives. And Yuzu said, please have all my money and I'm very sorry. And then they've taken their emulators offline. So that's the Yuzu emulator, which emulates Nintendo Switch games, and also the Nintendo 3DS emulator called Citra have both been taken offline. So this is a real sort of kick in the pants for the emulation community. And I personally, I'm in two minds about this, because for the Nintendo Switch, that is a current console, current generation,
currently available.
They're currently selling Nintendo Switch games. People can, if they are using the Yuzu emulator, it's presumably because they've illegally downloaded a Nintendo Switch game and they're wanting to play it now. So in that sense, I get that it encourages piracy and that's not a good thing. However, things like the Nintendo 3DS, that is a console that has been offline. So the Nintendo 3DS store has been offline for about a year. So you can't go and buy these games anymore. It's not as though you can go and
they're vaulted.
They're vaulted. So if you've got a cartridge, great, you can play a cartridge, and
you still got a working 3DS. You still got a working 3DS.
That's great. You can do whatever you want. However, if you're someone who's who's got a console and wants to buy any of these games online now and play them, you can't. You just need to look for a guy on the street somewhere with a trench coat open selling Pokemon Blue on the side of the road in order to be able to. You need to find a physical cartridge from a secondhand reseller, and they're now selling them for hundreds of dollars now. So it's just like not a thing that you can really get your hands on. So for that, it's like, well, even if you bought a secondhand cartridge off someone else and were able to play it, Nintendo's not making any money off that transaction anyway. So I kind of don't see the harm for consoles that are now defunct, that are no longer supported, like Super Nintendo, N64,
Nintendo
3DS. I know it's not how copyright, but it's like, to my mind, it kind of doesn't make sense that there are still, because it's like people, if there was a legal avenue for people to go and purchase these games and play them, they would do that. I would do that. Like if there was a way for me to go and get Pokemon Blue and be able to play it on my device currently for nostalgia value, I would do that. There's no avenue for me to be able to do that currently. So I need to rely on my 22-year-old Game Boy Color holding up for as long as I'm playing this game, which doesn't really make sense to me. It's like, you're not making it, you're not losing money as a result of this. So why not? I understand the legal argument, the copyright argument, but why not, as a Nintendo, kind of like turn a blind eye to the Nintendo 3DS, to Game Boy stuff, and it's making the emulation community freak out now. Everyone thinks they're going to get sued, so they're proactively pulling things off,
pulling stuff down until they know their legal position.
Well, I would suggest that it might be because it would be on the horizon, perhaps, for Nintendo to, and if they aren't already, to cash in on some of this nostalgia. So part of the Nintendo Online subscription, which you pay $30 a year for, allows you to play a handful of old games like Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, but it's certainly not a comprehensive library of everything they've ever put together, and that's on the Nintendo Switch. So
and not something that if you own the game already,
exactly,
and your console dies, like if your 64 dies and you've still got your cartridge and it works, you're like, and you can't get your hands on another 64, either, you're struggling to find them, they're prohibitively expensive or something. You're like, oh, I just can't use the thing that I have.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's
something that's legal, like the actual software is legal, the emulator, because often, if they are using Nintendo's code.
But this is
that's a different story.
Another issue. That's a different story.
With technology. It's like Betamax or like whatever. Like you might have, a bunch of old VHSs. Like Betamax is different to VHS, but you might have a bunch of old VHSs. But like getting a VHS player now is really difficult.
Oh,
but
definitely.
That's just what happens with technology. Technology moves on, and the thing you have is invalid.
But then if I decided to try and build something that can read that VHS and rip it to my hard drive to then watch, and fucking Toshiba or whoever made my VHS machine is like, suck my dick, Tom. No, you can't watch that movie anymore, you cuck. Even though you got to buy the Blu-ray anymore. You got to buy the Blu-ray.
In that case, the machine that you built is probably fine. It would be you reproducing the...
Well, no, it wouldn't be, because a VCR is like a patented piece of technology. Someone owns the copyright for that.
Yeah, so it depends like how I did it. So this is where we're getting a bit tricky because I'm not an engineer. But effectively, that's what the emulator software is. People have built a mechanism to read.
But you are then reproducing the intellectual property, the game, and you are putting it in a different format.
When people are pirating and distributing and doing that sort of stuff online, obviously that's wrong. I don't think either of us are arguing for piracy.
My father, having worked for Intellectual Property Australia, me doing it for my own use is not illegal. Like you getting a Blu-ray of a movie, no, it's not.
Digitizing your own stuff.
If I buy a Blu-ray of a movie and I rip it to my computer, and I have a computer copy of it, and I watch it for my own personal use. I don't put it on Pirate Bay. I don't put it on a thumb drive and give it to you. If it's just purely for my thing, I'm within my legal rights to do that.
But in the
Like,
case of
that's-
emulation, you're downloading it from so it's the person who's set like
The
distributing
piracy
the-
aspect is
Yes,
the illegal part.
But so that's my point. Yeah, when it's like I have a cartridge of GoldenEye 64, and I don't have a 64
Who's gonna
anymore.
do that?
But
Well, no, but
I've got it.
Plenty of people do, and that's one thing they often do. Like
I've got
a play.
physically rip it.
I've got these old cartridges from Nintendo 3DS. If I had the right software, I could pull the software off these cartridges and load it onto my 3DS and be able to play it on there, right?
Yeah, you can get something
It's
like
the same
a
thing as me
3DS
plugging it
card
in.
reader, or like a for the PlayStation 3, for example. I've got a PlayStation 3 emulator on my computer, and I ripped Metal Gear Solid 4 off its Blu-ray to run it on my computer. You can do it with a USB Blu-ray drive.
I think we as a culture have gotten very into this like digital media mindset where it's like, we don't own anything and everything's just a license.
And I mean, we don't, but
it used to be the case. And I think that's a very like 21st century mindset that I'm actually not that thrilled about as I get older. It used to be.
To be clear, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
I know. You always do. It's very frustrating. Why can't I have vociferous agreement to all my good points?
Because that would be very boring for listeners, George.
You're right.
Yeah.
You just did it again, you son of a bitch. So
this is not our avenue for everyone just to listen to us jerking each other off. We have to
that's Unnatural Selection After Dark. That's a separate subscription.
We have our
and you don't own that content. I can take it back at any time. The point is that I liked the idea that back in the day you buy an LP or you buy an album and that's your album and you have that and someone can't change it or take it away from you. I remember there was a case where Bruce Willis wanted to pass on his like multi-$1,000 Apple Music library to his kids. And Apple Music's like, nah, you don't own that music just because you bought it. It's actually a license.
Yeah.
So even though you spent tens of thousands of dollars on Apple Music songs, you don't actually own any of the shit that you own. And I think that's a really bad precedent to set. I like when I buy something, it's mine. I own it. I can choose to do whatever the fuck I want to do with it. And this kind of like giving away of property rights to large tech companies who have no respect for our own personal, wishes or desires. Like, I don't think that's a good trend. And we're seeing more and more stuff accrete to all these tech giants. When you look about Netflix, Netflix has done that for movies. I don't own Shaun of the Dead anymore, right? It's on the cloud somewhere. And it can get taken away from me or changed or modified. Or what if I don't want the modified version? What if I want the original Shaun of the Dead as shown in cinemas? Because I fucking paid for it. It's mine.
A good example of that was funny. Speaking of Dune, it's on, I think, a couple of streaming platforms like Amazon and maybe the first movie is on Amazon and Apple. And I'm 90% sure the other day they were advertising, like I'm talking like 3 weeks ago, they were like, do you want to watch Dune? Like, here's Dune, here's a suggestion. And now we do want to watch Dune. I go into the Apple TV app. It's $5 to rent it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you fuckers. But this is the thing, is it's like the new economy is all about how can we milk the intellectual property for as much wealth as we can.
Yeah,
and I
think that's bad.
It makes good business sense, but it does.
Yeah. This is a thing of I don't not understand why Nintendo are doing it.
Yeah.
I would just like to describe why they're cunts for doing it.
and especially when it comes to properties, like people are taking down Game Boy Color emulators and things like that. The consoles that this Game Boy Color that I've got here in my hand, which is somehow still working. You gotta love that Nintendo quality hardware. Is 22 years old. Okay, like you have not made $1 of Pokemon Blue from 22 years ago for several years. Like, just let me have this.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you go to wish.com, you can buy a 400 game retro video machine for $16.48.
Yeah.
Like, have they paid for the intellectual property on those apps?
Hell no. And so that's why it's always been a really tricky area, because it's the thing of, that the actual, like, back to emulators, the actual, like, design creation and, like, distribution of this software itself is not illegal, providing it's not using anyone's intellectual property, like if they're not using the base code for how the consoles worked and all that sort of stuff. If it's all original code by these people, but it can run Nintendo stuff, totally legal, and that's all fine. And if you have your own copies, you can use them for your own use, and that's also fine. But it also is something that can be used for piracy. But there are so many things that are like can be used for a perfectly legal purpose, but can also be used for crime.
Computers
Computers can.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right?
I think
can.
the way Nintendo probably could go about this, I think, which would be much more effective, is simply, on your latest console, which is basically a computer in and of itself anyway, is just offer those, rather than having a handful of games, just open up your back catalog to run on an emulation on the Switch, or whatever. What's the latest one? The Switch?
The Nintendo Switch, yeah.
The Switch, yeah. Just fucking get Pokemon and charge someone $3
get $5 a month, whatever it is. Give me a legal way to access this shit.
And they have got with streaming.
They have got that Nintendo subscription service, but like I said, it's like a handful of games. It's not a complete thing. All these digital files are out there. You can go and just get these digital files and run them on perfectly good emulators right now. So the idea to me that like Nintendo couldn't retroactively activate their entire back catalog at a pretty much a moment's notice without much effort and then turn around and charge for it, like that does not fly.
500 megabyte update.
They absolutely would be able to do it. So it's like, okay, allow us to pay you for this. I would pay that $30 a year for the Nintendo Online subscription if it included all of their back catalog. Like I would give me a legal way to get this and I will pay for it.
Which was the argument for streaming services, right? We said, well, we'll stop downloading the 4K Avatar, Blu-ray if you give us a way to watch Avatar in 4K. And then Netflix came along and said, yeah, $13 a month. No worries.
Yeah, but you don't have everything in perpetuity because it's like when Netflix was the one streaming service, you had everything. And so it's kind of like not a big deal.
We're back.
Things come in and out of licensing deals every 6 months.
We'll just be going down to the video store. Like we're back at square one now, where it's like there is so much competition and the prices are so fucking expensive that I'm back to the point where I'm like, maybe I'll just I saw the $5 for Dune, and a large part of my brain went, oh, I could probably work out a way to get that for free.
Honestly, it's more me thinking like, and I guess when movies, you get to the weird sort of point of like, I like to buy the physical ones sometimes if it's a movie that I really want to own or like watch it in the 4K Blu-ray. I think I have the 4K of Dune and I hadn't seen it, but I was like, I missed it at the cinema, but I know this is something I want to see in the highest quality I can, so I paid for it. But also, like $5 whole to rent to watch a movie once. Like I'm probably only going to watch it once, so it'll be $5 rather than paying $25 to then have the thing forever if it's not something that I particularly want to own. So it's always a balance, right?
I would only want to own something if I've got like a real, like a particular attachment to it. Like I bought the Lord of the Rings films. Like I probably, I'd buy Shaun of the Dead. There are things that I want to have myself because they're like really meaningful pieces of media to me. The rest, I don't mind just paying whatever it is, $17 a month to Netflix to be able to stream stuff if and when it's on the service. But I think it's part of a bigger disturbing trend that these large digital companies are, taking their very litigious big boy shoes and stepping on developers who are creating emulators that it's for people who love your product. And the people who use these emulators and play your back catalog and do all these sorts of things are more likely to turn around and spend money on your future stuff when it comes out. So it just feels like it's really killing the community to a certain extent. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're particularly for Nintendo, like, the people who are emulating your stuff are also your
They are massive market. Nintendo fans. They will go and play through your back catalog, and when you bring out Zelda, Breath of the Wild 3 or whatever, they will go and buy that at $90 a piece, brand new. Like that. There are studies that show the people that are spending time on these emulators doing this sort of stuff are the people that are also emulating. Like they're your super fans because they're engaged. It's not hard to imagine if someone's spending all of their time playing Nintendo games emulating, and then a new Nintendo game comes out, that they would turn around and pay for it, right? So it just seems like in the interests of wringing every last dollar out of the community for this quarter, they're actually like shooting themselves in the foot. It's exec brain. It's the same thing that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks of like, but I need to look at this quarter's results. And if this quarter doesn't quarter over quarter go more than the last quarter, then I'm going to fucking kill myself. Who's going to return value to the shareholders? Right.
But like, I feel that, I also just feel kind of passionately about this for the sake of history as well. Like, so that things don't just disappear to the whims of corporations when we're trying to like look at video games, particularly historically, because they're so beholden to more varieties of platforms. Like, I know this happens kind of with all media, like vinyl, CD, then digital, and like DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, all that sort of stuff. But when you've got like Nintendo alone is generations of consoles.
Yeah. Like, over 30, 40 years, right? Like,
And like, so not only home consoles, but handheld consoles and several different types of handheld consoles. And like, there's been 5 PlayStations and then also portable PlayStations and all this sort of stuff. And then the Sega and the Sega consoles that now don't get made anymore and all this sort of stuff, that they're all across so many different kinds of like mechanisms to enjoy them, that they can easily just be forgotten to time.
So you're saying that there is a relevance in preserving the artistic
preservation. Absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely. Like you know, it'd be like if we couldn't read books that were written yonks ago to kind of appreciate how literature has like evolved over time. Like, I know books kind of haven't changed really as a medium, like words on a page. It's kind of just being consistent across that time, right?
Remarkably stable in terms of its technological.
Yeah, so my point is that video games aren't that. So in order to be able to have that kind of history of this art form, we need to look at these things kind of differently. We can't just let these companies go like, oh, well, we're not selling that console anymore, so
fuck you, buy the new one.
No one's allowed to like enjoy this old game anymore that we have just decided, too hard. Like they call it abandonware software, like stuff that's not sold anymore that people are like, well, I think we're just allowed to pirate this and share it around because there is 0 legal avenues to play it.
Emily Bronte didn't come around and kick the copy of Wuthering Heights out of your hand when she brought out a sequel or when she decided to make some changes. Like, you traditionally, you buy a thing, you own a thing, that's yours, and you can do whatever you want with it. I think that's a better model. I'm getting really sick of this digital economy. You're only renting things, you don't actually own things. Like, there was that whole discussion we had about streaming games. I think it was the head of EA Games said something to the effect of like, people need to get used to not owning that you don't own games.
Was it Ubisoft? I forget who it was, but yeah.
And then basically all the memes that were coming out of that after that were, okay, well, if you can't own any of these games, then piracy isn't theft. Like, if I don't have ownership of it, then me pirating it isn't doing anything, right? It's I think, so we've got Dry C Weedo 7 writing in saying, my ethics are that if a game isn't sold anymore, especially retro consoles, it's fair game. Yeah, I'd have to say, I mean, like, the law is not on our side, but ethically, I'm inclined to agree with you. Like, like you say, if you can't get the game somewhere, like if I can't legally turn around and give Nintendo money to go and play Pokemon Blue anywhere, I morally don't see the problem with that.
Yeah, like all the reasonings for intellectual property and copyright law and all that sort of stuff, I feel rarely apply when it's a matter of like, well, it like, for all intents and purposes, this game does not exist anymore. So
you decided it doesn't exist. If you give me a method to pay for it, I'll pay for it.
Yeah. It's like, if it was available like digitally on my Switch, maybe I'll pick it up. Like the subscription thing, like I'm just like, I hate that. I don't like, if I'm in the mood to play Mario 64 again, I don't want to pay for a year to play all this other stuff I won't touch. Just like, instead of $30 for the year, can I just give you $15 and have Mario 64 forever?
But that's what they would do, like, these consoles. They would release and re-release games on updated consoles for the longest time. I can't tell you how many times I've like purchased and repurchased games later on Steam or whatever that originally came out on.
How many times have Naughty Dog re-released The Last of Us now?
A perfect example.
Oh my god, right? Like, yeah, and I love that game, but like, or like, how many times has Grand Theft Auto 6 just been 6? 5 is the one coming out. 5 been on fucking everything.
Yeah.
It's still like the graph. Look at the end of the day, the graph goes up. And to the right.
Yeah. Yes.
And, economy good economy.
They do just keep re-releasing shit. I cannot wait for The Last of Us Part 1 remastered. After we've had The Last of Us, then The Last of Us remastered, then The Last of Us Part 1, then they'll do The Last of Us Part 1 remastered.
Hasn't The Last of Us Part 1 already been
That is
remastered?
The remaster.
Yeah. PlayStation 3 original release. The Last of Us Remastered was the PS3 one remastered to PS4. Then on PS5 they released The Last of Us Part 1,
which is like a whole rebuild.
The original game rebuilt on a better graphics quality and incorporating a lot of the gameplay elements of The Last of Us Part 2. So then if they remaster that one, that will have to be called The Last of Us Part 1 Remastered.
I'm doing my life wrong. I'm sorry. I need to go and...
But we know this, like we know that in instances where streaming services come on, like Australia was absolutely ratchet for piracy, right? Like we would pirate when Game of Thrones is happening, we were like infamous. People were like, oh, those fucking pirates down in Australia because we had no legitimate avenues of getting these things. And as soon as
unless you had Foxtel,
as soon as there was a wide availability of these streaming services where I can go on Netflix or I can go on Binge or whichever service has it, and I can get it same day as the US, and I can pay for it and get it legitimately. As soon as those services came about, what happened? Piracy in Australia dropped off a cliff. Went really down, like a fraction of a % of what it once was. So I believe in the idea that
listeners, you'd have local Australian actors like Brian Brown who'd come in and just a really gritty sort of thing before you'd watch a movie. It was always before you saw something in the cinema, and they'd be like, "Why you got to pirate? You try watching a DVD." This was a legit ad that Brian Brown.
Have you tried stealing a handbag?
Yeah, there was also another one.
You wouldn't steal a car.
We all said you wouldn't steal a handbag. Turns out you would.
Well, all I needed to do was walk up to a handbag and then tap it twice, and then I got an exact copy of that handbag that I got to keep, and no one loses their handbag, I would absolutely do that all the time.
It's the cloning trick where they're cloning the Master Ball from Pokemon. It's a very niche reference. I'm done now. Are we done? Let's pack her up. I'm hot.
I reckon we're done. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and motherflippin' TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me to the bathtub where I'll be getting naked and getting into some ice cold water.
Not a big tub of sludge, a la the Baron.
I didn't get why he was in balsamic vinegar.
He's bathing in oil, Adam. It
looked like balsamic vinegar. I was like, why is he in balsamic vinegar?
Lisan al-Gaib! I'm not the Lisan al-Gaib. That's totally something the Lisan al-Gaib would say! Okay, love you guys. See you next week.
Yeah.
I need to watch this fucking movie.
You do. And then you need to fuck the popcorn bucket.